All right, hey, we're going to get started. It's 10:03, and we have a fairly significant number. I'm going to end up taking roll just by showing or taking a screenshot on the side, and so we won't go down any kind of roll at this point, but I'll take that just off of who is showing up in my participant list here on the side. And I appreciate everybody taking the time. In a second, I'm just going to let Julie Gardner just say hello also, but we're going to end up starting fairly quickly with a presentation done by Mark Ferries because he has a class that he has to teach in about an hour. So we want to get him up and going pretty quickly. So again, thank you for being here. I'm really excited. I can't tell you how I'm excited to get this started. And as I look through the applications of y'all, I was really impressed with the caliber of agents that we have that applied, and you all are the selected group to go through this training, and I'm hoping that by the end of it, we'll have together even greater vision as to what Path to the Plate is and what it can be. So we're looking to you to help form that vision as well as help do the program itself. So Julie, anything you want to say before we get started?
No, can you hear me, Dan?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. No, I just want to say good morning, and I too am very excited about this group. This, of course, is our second champion cohort we're training, and so we're excited to kick off today. And then I think as we move through the year, you will be impressed with what the agendas that we're putting together and the trainings we're putting together. And I look forward to all the creativity and Path to the Plate programs that we start seeing happening throughout the year with this group. So welcome, and I'll turn it over to Dan to turn over to Mark.
Okay. So as you know, we sent out a questionnaire, and I had 17 of you all participate in that questionnaire with the goal of really trying to better understand some of the questions that you're receiving as agents, as well as some that you maybe personally have. Just know that those questionnaires are totally anonymous, so I had no idea who sent out what questions. So you can really say whatever you want to say in those, and you're covered. And anyways, you'd be covered regardless. But from our standpoint, I have shared those with the speakers. While I know we will not cover all of them because they will be covered in future events such as GMOs, at least as in detail, will not be covered here, but we will be covering those and pesticides and other things and questions that you had. So if it's not covered here, we will definitely be covering them down the road. And I'm hoping to take those questions along with other questions from questionnaires as we go into the future and put a Q&A together for agents based off of these questions that you've had. So please take those questionnaires very seriously. All right, as you know, we're talking about today, we're starting with the plate. And I really felt that this was important to start with the plate because as we go to a spinach field or we go to a citrus farm or we go to a ranch, we want to keep kind of the end goal in mind that we are in the business of producing food, and that food does have an impact on our well-being as well as our health and our longevity, in this world. So there is a role and a connection with health and agriculture and food. So what better thing than to start with the plate side? And so we have Mark Ferries today to help talk to us about kind of the state of health in Texas as well as the U.S., and then also better understand food and nutrition aspects of our health. So Mark, I'm going to let you go ahead and turn the control over to you and let you, go ahead and put your presentation up and we'll get started. Also, if you have questions, please type them into the chat message. I'll try to monitor those and write those down as we go through and take and record that. And so if you have questions, please put those down there, or when there's a time, you can definitely turn your mic off and ask those questions to the group as a whole, audio using your microphones. All right, Mark, all yours.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Julie, for the inviting and getting this going. And thanks for everybody joining in this morning. I'm really excited, as Dan said, about this possibility. Now, it's common for me to come in and talk about trends in health. And those who have heard sort of the first part of this type of presentation, you know that I like to start out and keep things light by talking about death. So that's where we'll start. These are the 7 leading causes or 10 leading causes of death in the United States, as published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And these are updated at least every couple of years. But we see that heart disease, cancer, respiratory disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and kidney disease, these are highlighted because they are classified as chronic diseases. They tend to last for a long time, and their development in years past used to be pretty slow developing as well. However, as Dan said, because of the impact of our lifestyle, such as diet, on these types of diseases, the rate, the incidence, so to speak, of these increasing has been much faster and higher than it has been in the past. Subsequently, the prevalence, so the number of people who have these diseases and the subsequent impacts on their life. And this is also a point to share that you've been hearing a lot about nutrition and lifestyle and health. And as Dan said, the end result of improving, bettering the lives of Texans, and health being a key component of that. One of the other consequences that we talk about or hear about a lot, at least from the state, is that the federal level, and Texas mirrors this, almost 90% of all healthcare costs go toward chronic diseases. The reason this is really important from a financial situation is that chronic diseases are considered preventable. In other words, a large degree of them should not even exist. And so that's a lot of money, not only at the state, federal level, but as individuals, prescription drugs, surgeries, other type of modalities, therapies, et cetera, going toward diseases that, again, largely should not exist. And so about 2/3 of people have chronic diseases, at least one. Usually, if you have one, you have multiple. And there's a lot of things that could lead into that. Now, if we take the United States look and we hone in on Texas, we see a very similar situation. However, 8 of the top 10 leading causes of death in Texas, as opposed to 7 in the United States, are preventable chronic diseases. About 50% of all deaths, as you see, mirrors between Texas and US, are from heart disease and cancer alone. They by far make up the bulk, and so we hear a lot about those two. Now, diabetes, we do hear a lot about. These are age adjusted rates of death. A lot of diabetics end up dying from heart disease, for example, and so they would fall into that category, even though the heart disease was largely from a result from their lifestyles that led to the diabetes in the first place. And so the joint combination of the lifestyles that lead to one of these is probably going to also contribute to others. So we think a lot about these causes of death and the healthcare costs and how in the world do we prevent them. And so as we're seeing, we have chronic disease that predicts death. But then if we take a step back, well, why is chronic disease on the rise? And I've already given a hint, and Dan's given it away, but the idea that our lifestyles are a leading cause. And actually, if we look at the data and to summarize it, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, so a diet that's rich in fruits, vegetables, and other plant food, beans and whole grains and things that you've heard before, physical activity, not smoking, and a healthy body weight. These 4 lifestyle factors are predicted to prevent upwards of 80% of all chronic disease. So all the ones that you saw on that list. And so let's say we painted a picture of someone who was kind of doing things right, following along with the government regulations and recommendations for a healthy lifestyle. One, this particular person would not smoke. They would eat, as we saw, a diet rich in fruit and vegetables. Why? Because the most recent data we have, this was published 2018, as you see in the Journal of American Medical Association. The leading risk factor for death, and this is premature death, and when you hear death, yes, everybody is at risk for dying, but when you hear that, they're referring to dying too soon, dying early, before our time, or premature death. Dietary risk are now the leading cause of death in the US and have been for at least 7 years. Tobacco use is still high, but it's now number 2. So these clearly are 2 important factors that we need to take care of. If you look at the risk itself, this is one of the largest, if not the largest study, pulling together all the prospective studies to look at, okay, what is the role of fruits and vegetables, for example, on the risk of various diseases? And what they end up finding is that people who end up eating 7 servings of fruit and vegetables per day, relative to groups who only eat 1 serving per day, have a much lower risk of mortality or dying too soon for coronary heart disease, stroke, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and all causes. Those who got 10 servings of fruit and vegetables a day, you can see that the benefits, at least reducing the risk of early mortality, were improved even more. So this is why you hear people say, look, get 7 to 13 servings of fruit and vegetables per day so that we can start compiling these up and get the great benefits. Choose My Plate, for example, starting with the plate. And I know Dr. Anding will probably talk more about this. So half of the plate, as you see, is fruit and vegetables. And as you're aware of their recommendations, 75% are plants. And then depending on how you vary your proteins, you could have 100% of your plate coming from plant sources. We see across the world these longevity hotspots. So these are the places in the world who have the highest percentage of people living to 100 or higher. And there is something very consistent, several things that are consistent across these. And what they find is that every one of them, their diet is rich in fruits and vegetables. It doesn't mean it's 100% fruits and vegetables or plants, but it's definitely rich in those. We've had other recommendations that have come out based on this, and they say, this quote I like, it says, eat food, meaning whole food, and this is from Michael Pollan, not too much, mostly plants, so a lot of fruits and vegetables. So we have this clear indication at this point, at least, that we really want people not to smoke, get fruits and vegetables, and then of course be able to exercise. It's not only about aerobic exercise, which is really important for the heart and the plumbing throughout the body, but as you know, weight training can be important too. Why? Because if you look at this list, as of 2018, the only other behavior is alcohol and drug use, and low physical activity is on this list as well. So we tend to focus in family community health, for example, and Healthy Texas efforts on these type of behaviors. We know that, look, and this was a European study that said healthy living is the best revenge we have against these chronic diseases. But the thing that interests me as a behavioral scientist, somebody who's engaged with why people do and don't do what they're supposed to, especially as it relates to health, including myself, we find that those 4 factors in the European study here, only about 9% had all 4. So yes, if you could get all 4 and maintain all 4 of those factors, eat a healthy diet that's rich in fruit and vegetables, be physically active, not smoke, and maintain a healthy body weight, you could have tremendous benefits in reduction in risk of getting a disease and dying from that disease. But this study found only about 9% of people were able to get all 4. The estimates I've seen in the US is as low as 3% of Americans maintain all 4 of these factors. And we see it in Texas as well. This is a little bit earlier data, but it's 2013 CDC report on the median, so the middle of the road daily vegetable intake in adults. And Texas is about 1.6 per day. And so depending on who you look at, if it's 5 servings per day, or like we saw previously, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, if it's 1.6, we're just low in that intake. We see adults in both the US and Texas consuming less than 1 fruit or vegetable per day. In fruits in Texas, it's about 40% consume less than 1 per day. And when we get to the veggies, we see that it's about 22% get less than 1 per day. Again, the median is 1.6 for vegetables and about 1 fruit per day for adults in the state of Texas. If we look at adolescents, it's potentially a little bit worse, but looking at, again, the percentage is getting less than 1 fruit or vegetable per day. So about 42% don't get even 1 fruit per day. And in Texas, we have a situation where about 47.5%, almost 50% of adolescents don't even get one vegetable in a given day. And so again, it's really, really low. So if we look at the median, it's 1 and 1. So if somebody asks you about how much, it's about 1.5 for adults, veggies per day, 1 fruit per day. For adolescents, it's about 1 veggie per day and about 1 fruit per day. The newest state indicator report from CDC is out for 2018, and you see in this top table that fruit and vegetable consumption in Texas, only about 12% of adults actually meet the fruit intake recommendation, and only 11% of adults meet the daily vegetable intake recommendation. I also provided down below improving access to fruit and vegetables, because clearly if the consumption is low, you have a few different things that we don't really have time to get into today, but it's intriguing. You have individual level reasons. I don't want to eat vegetables. I don't want to eat fruit. I don't like it. I don't know how to cook it. I don't have the desire or motivation to do that. Other is I don't have the skill set or the confidence to be able to make or do things. Others, I don't have the money, or maybe in this case, I don't have the access to fruits and vegetables. And so this bottom table is showing you in Texas and US, the number of farmers markets per 100,000 residents in 2018. You see Texas is low relative to the US. Percentage of farmers in the second row there accepting SNAP funding for women, infants, and children. Farmers Market Nutrition Program vouchers. You can see that we are quite a bit lower as well than the US. State policy on food service guidelines, no, and only 10 states in the US have. Physical activity, we see a similar trend in that about 25% of all Texans get no physical activity. So in other words, they get up in the morning, they get ready for work, they ride in their car to work, they sit at work all day, they ride in their car back home, they sit in the afternoon watching TV, whatever they're doing, maybe piddle around here or there, they get ready for bed, go to sleep, and they do it all again the next day. So they're not achieving any physical activity. This would be what we would call sedentary. Then if you look at the adults meeting the actual guidelines, it's only about 1 out of every 5. So what, again, we keep thinking about, especially in extension where we're all about education and prevention education in particular, is okay, I got death and chronic disease leads to death, premature death, I get that. Okay, you've sold me, behavior leads to chronic disease. And again, that's why you've been hearing about it. It's not only the scale of how many people are getting diseases and are dying from them, being 7 or 8 of the 10 leading causes of death, it's the exorbitant healthcare costs, and it's the impact on people's quality of life. And so all those things add up and say, okay, this is why we're putting so much emphasis on behavior, especially these particular lifestyle behaviors, eating a healthy diet, not smoking, and being physically active. But again, we got to think, okay, as you do an extension, what causes that behavior? Why is that? We've already hinted at that, right? It's personal factors, perhaps. Maybe it is the situation of access. And so the way I generally conceptualize this is breaking down behavior. So what you see is these 3 gears, and it represents goals. So health goals, for example, being healthier is a big goal. It takes time to reach that. So you see that it sort of clicks along, but it depends on the do goals, right? So this is, I need to do a healthier diet, for example. But then you notice that 3rd gear, it's called an action goal. This, what does it take for me or you to eat healthier? To get 7 servings of fruit and vegetables in a day, to make half my plate fruits and vegetables. Well, I got to buy it. I got to know how to cook it. I got to get a knife that actually cuts it. I got to do this. I got to do this. All these little actions that we have to do day to day. If that gear doesn't spin, then as you know about gear systems, the do goal does not spin. And then we don't reach our be goal, in this case, being healthy. And so when we educate, we really have to hone in and focus in at the individual level, at least, on all of those actions. Too many people set be goals. I want to be healthy. Okay, I need to eat healthier. I know I need to eat more fruits and vegetables. I need to be physically active. I get it. But then that's where they stop. And so we want to focus on the action. And what's great about Path to the Plate and some of our other efforts, especially accommodating myths or incorrect thinking, fallacious thinking about healthy lifestyles, is people think they're doing the right thing, but they're not. And so they think this gear is connected, but it's not. And then that can create a reproach. It can say, I'm never going to try to eat healthy again. I'm never trying to live an active lifestyle. I've tried and it doesn't work. And so part of our education is to make sure people are choosing the right behaviors and that it's sound in the research. because there's going to be goal conflict. We have conflict even within ourselves, right? And as we learn and grow into this area of health and chronic disease prevention, people are faced out in the world with a lot of temptation to eat the unhealthy route, and me and you and everybody else. And so I ask people, how easy is it for you to eat unhealthy in your house? If it's easy, then that's going to be problematic. It creates the situation that we're visualizing here called goal conflict. People want to eat healthy, but I don't have access, or I have access to the unhealthy foods, or I like the unhealthy foods, which may be fine, and those can be a part of a healthy diet. But if it becomes so overwhelming that now their disease risk increase and their longevity decreases and their quality of life decreases, it becomes problematic. And also, as you're thinking about where you fit in, I know not everybody's coming from a family community health standpoint, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But there's going to be a lot of barriers. And this is where I think from a cooperative, coordinated effort between all of our specialties and disciplines can become really important to remove these barriers. But we're dealing with a population that's going to have trouble in adopting these behaviors, because we're creating an expectation that, okay, look, you need to eat more of this because chronic disease death. Okay, I get it. But you're asking me to do a lot, right? It seems like a lot to change my lifestyle, to overcome temptations, to find access, to cook, to spend time and prioritize it so much in my life. There are so many mental things, again, that we don't have to talk about, that we can help with our education, that people can learn the skills, how to apply the results of this scientific research. This study is kind of interesting. To digress for a second, they looked at undergrad students, they brought them into the lab and they shocked them. And so they asked, hey, do you want to get shocked again? And they all said no. What if I paid you money? Would you get shocked again? They said no. So then they put them in a room by themselves with only a chair and the ability to shock themselves. So within 15 minutes, 67% of the guys shocked themselves. 190 shock came from one guy, shocked themselves 190 times, as opposed to not shocking themselves. 25% of the women within 15 minutes shocked themselves. Why? The study goes on to say that it's very difficult for people to sit and engage their mind alone without being instantly gratified by something else, by not having that filled with time and things to think about and do and do and do. And people were so busy and stressed, that mind is very difficult for us to change behavior. And so that's what we're dealing with as an example. So when we work with individuals, for example, and this will lead us into our sort of community and statewide efforts, perhaps, as it relates to chronic disease prevention through diet and other healthy lifestyles. So I would think, how would I help this one particular individual? Well, I would teach them the what, right? This is what you should do or is best for your health. If you choose to do it, at least I'm going to get the information to you, and you're an adult, you can choose whether you want to do that or not. There's the how. How would you do this? And then why would you do this? And if you're not aware, and if somebody asks you to define extension, this quote from Everett Rogers in a publication in 1963, if you don't know Everett Rogers, I highly recommend that you look him up. But he says this: since its inception, the purpose of the Cooperative Extension Service has been to change human behavior by teaching people how to apply the results of scientific research. And so what's the end result? Changing behavior. And we're doing it by teaching people how to apply the results of scientific research, not what we think, not what we believe, not what I heard or read on the internet. Clearly 1963, this was before the internet. And so it's not based on that stuff. It's based on the scientific research. That's what we are translating. And we should see this in our program development. So this is one thing that we can all do. We can all consider what programs are we doing and how does it tie into these behaviors that lead to chronic disease and lead to premature death, high costs, and poor quality of life. We need to move, as we do this, from just knowledge-based programming to where we're doing it based on what we know or what we think. There's value there, so don't hear that incorrectly. But as we move from knowledge-based to research-based. So now I'm basing my recommendations and my programming, my education on the research. That is good too. However, the next and the third step is actually to create these programs and evaluate them in a way that we can say with scientific rigor in particular populations in a particular way of delivery, so fidelity, that this program is evidence-based, and here is the publication that shows this thing works. As we move through these, we can increase our visibility, our credibility, especially from the scientific community. But again, at the end of the day, it's also given us confirmation that what we're doing and the time that we're spending and the effort that we're putting in, and everybody puts in a lot of hard work, is actually producing the impacts that we want. Now, it's also going to include cooperation and coordination. We typically are very good at this, and so this is not new to you, but we need to consider how we can do this within this chronic disease prevention standpoint. We do have an example. The North Karelia project, if you get time to look into it, you'll find it very interesting. And actually, every discipline that's present today will probably find a benefit in looking at this and how their portion, their impact was changed to achieve the goals that this project had. In short, the late 1970s, North Karelia, Finland had the highest rates of heart disease in the world. And so they decided to do something about it. And they enacted a top-down, bottom-up, top-to-bottom effort to try to reduce chronic disease and the subsequent deaths and the poor quality of life. The heart study, particularly, you see mortality rates from coronary heart disease in North Karelia and all of Finland. You can see where the start of the North Karelia project was, and then the extension of the project nationally. You work your way down. What has the change been in North Karelia and Finland? 85% and 80% reduction, and you see on the left, mortality per 100,000 men in this particular graph. So in other words, what was our prediction? Our estimates were if people could eat a healthy diet, not smoke, maintain adequate levels of physical activity, and maintain a healthy weight from those behaviors, we could reduce chronic disease by 80%. Now we have North Karelia and an entire country showing us that that can happen. Now that was as of 2005. As of the most recent data that I've seen, this is also being maintained. But again, it wasn't just education, it was a cooperative, coordinated agreement across all areas to create this change. So from my standpoint, as an extension health specialist with family and community health, that's the way I view it. I'm like, okay, let's plug in Texas for North Karelia. Let's plug in a county for North Karelia and learn from what they did, learn what we can do, and adjust accordingly to fit the county, do it in a way that's sustainable so that when we leave or any grants or whatever leaves, it can be maintained, and something that can be replicable. If I can do it in one county, can I do it in the next, the next, the next? If so, could we see these sort of reductions in family and community health? And likely as things continue to, we learn more and more, this is going to be all of our efforts to some degree, and that's why this path to the plate is quite brilliant. Number three, and the last thing I want to bring up as far as how we can help with application in the short time we have is, this phrase has been stuck in my mind as I've been having other conversations across not only the campus or the state, but also in the nation about chronic disease prevention and utilizing extension as a main mechanism to help with that. And so this inspire innovation just stays in my mind. And one reason it does is because I was talking to my colleagues with the One Health, and many of you may be familiar with this. If you're not, I highly recommend you look into it. But I was talking to my colleagues with One Health, and the thought came up is, okay, could we use this One Health approach, this synergy between human health, animal health, and environmental health, to come up with strategies for any sort of complex problem? And they already do a really great job with infectious disease. So I was thinking, okay, well, why can't we do this with chronic disease? So actually what I did, I started asking everybody. I started talking to all the One Health and animal health, human health, environmental health, and figuring out what was the process? How did you guys collaborate and coordinate and buddy up to go take on some of these infectious diseases over the past years? My father, Dr. Buddy Ferris, was big into One Health before it was One Health. And so I went and we made a pot of coffee, and I sat 2 hours with him and how he dealt with, he was in veterinary medicine, how he dealt with tons of animal health issues over the last 4 decades. And this is what I found. And it's just, again, just an idea. a way to think, and maybe it can pull us together to talk about other ideas. This is not the end all. Again, just inspiring innovation. It's all right to have bad ideas, but at least we can throw some out and see. So again, just an example. What I ended up finding is that step one, they identified the what. They picked the specialty, animal, human, environmental health, and then they labeled the disease or the dimension, primary dimension. Then they started looking at all the risk factors in step two, the why. So why was this disease happening? And then they labeled those, in this case, with the human. But then then they moved to step three. Oh, sorry, we're still in step two, the why. So this was looking at determinants from the other areas. So as you see in red, what was going on with the animal world that was contributing to this infectious disease? And then environmentally, what's going on that contributes or is an increased determinant for this particular disease? Then step three was the how. So then what they did was, in not this graphical form, as a health psychologist, I think in path models. So hopefully you kind of like this, but it visualizes, okay, we would then put these in an arrangement and go in, and then the question marks would be, this is where we step in. Now, it might be extension. It might be more on the production side, changes that need to be made. It might be research things that need to be done. But in essence, we create a mitigation plan, which is what they've been doing with chronic disease, extension research, and policy. If you like documentaries, you may want to spend time looking at cholera in London in the late 1800s or the mid 1800s, 19th century. I won't spend much time here, but it's interesting. As you know, probably, that cholera being a bacteria, what they did in step one was they labeled, like, okay, here's the disease. This was actually before they even knew it was cholera, but they knew something was going on. When they went to step two, before they had the name cholera, they were finding that ingesting water and poor sanitation on the human side. They found that on the animal side, cow sheds, slaughterhouses, and feces were running into the streets, and all that mess was running into the river, and then that water in the river was being pumped back to the water pump. So people were drinking all the feces and mess, not only from the animals, but also, as you see in the environment, cesspools down in basements. This was before toilet systems. So they just went to the bathroom in their basement and paid people to come scoop it out with buckets. The water pump, all that was coming back in. There's people talking about how there was hair and feces in the water, and people were drinking that. But that was their source of water. And so they created a plan. And again, if you get time to read about it or look at it, this was largely a pictorial showing of what they did. They used education, they used public policy, they did some research eventually. You see on the Joseph Bazalgette, what he ended up doing was he redesigned the London sewage system, which is largely still used today. And he was an engineer, and it was quite awesome. There was research, Dr. John Snow, who found out that it was the one particular Broad Street water pump that was causing this issue. He got rid of the water pump with the government, and cholera went away. And then that spurred tons of research, so now we know much more about it. And again, all this happened before there was a name. So then I think, okay, what could we do with our leading cause of death in the state of Texas and the US, heart disease? Could we think in a collaborative, cooperative effort amongst, in this case, just these three dimensions? And so heart disease, step one, I'd put that at the top. Step two would be the why. So what are the risk factors, right? These are the things that the evidence tells us at this point, right? We got all the high cholesterol, blood glucose, central obesity, unhealthy diet, all the stuff that we just talked about. But we also have low plant food intake. We got high processed food intake. You have access issues on the green environmental side, the media, the confusion that people get, or just the false information that people get. And then on the animal side, we already have research going on with this, and Dr. Hell can probably talk about it more clearly than I can, but what are we doing research-wise and education-wise on meat quality? MyPlate, USDA talks about specific characteristics, for example, lean meat. So they would talk about quality there. There are really great research studies going on and innovations going on with meat processing and production. Same thing on the production side of plant sides. And Dana mentioned GMOs, and I'm sure there'll be conversations about pesticides and insecticides. That's all really good information. because it allows us to get a better picture of potential contribution or no contribution to these chronic diseases. So then, boom, what if we created a plan cooperatively in a coordinated fashion to try to piece together, again, education, policy, research to mitigate the chronic disease problem? As we inspire innovation, we always go back to the goal of extension to change human behavior by teaching people how to apply the results of scientific research. And so my encouragement for my little bit of time with you today, and I would love to talk to you more, is thinking about your area and innovating. How could you help this one individual navigate this chronic disease from your expertise and from where you educate? That the idea of the One Health model, for example, if we're in a room and there was something that humans were doing to affect environmental health, well, I would need to be at the table and how can we help? Or if there's something that humans were doing to affect water runoff or affecting wildlife or affecting animal health, I would need to be at the table. Hey, how can we help? How can we contribute? Because at the end of the day, if it's bettering the lives of Texans, then the what, the how, and the why would need to be contributed. But this individual is in the midst of a county. They're in the midst of a community. They're in the midst of a state. This is called the social ecological model. And we use this across all disciplines to affect behavior change. And so you've likely seen it, but it's really common in the health field, to where that individual is surrounded by interpersonal connections, the family. Eating a healthy meal at the dinner table, for example, there's so many benefits to that, and that's being lost. There's interpersonal connection with peers and youth and adults, work sites. So you move out to the next circle, institutional. What's going on at work? What's healthcare doing? Are they helping this or are they making things worse? What's going well? What's going poorly? What's somewhere in the middle of the road? Identifying those key factors. Then you move out to the community level. What programming are we doing there? What are the risk factors there? How are we getting more farmers markets and seeing if those are actually as beneficial as we hope? We have the Walk Across Texas program, for example, that's a community-based program, team-based program to get people active across the community. Brazos County is going on right now. And then we move all the way out to social policy. So this is law, so big law, but there's also small law or small policy. And so people can set policies in their house. We can set policies at church. We can set policies in our places of business that we're not going to serve those things in the vending machines, or we're going to get rid of vending machines. We're going to use air fryers instead of liquid oil fryers. But those can be based on, again, individual behavior or policy. Depending on what slant you have, one aspect is to work outside in, right? It's thinking about how could we develop policies and social pressure, so to speak, to conform the individual to a particular way. Me being an individual health psychologist, a theorist, I tend to think, what can we do to inspire the individual to then mobilize themselves, make the correct decisions, and influence the community's interpersonal relationships around them? I think, and I think there's a consensus of us in the health arena, is that if we can put that individual in the proper environment, and using this analogy for Path to the Plate, I think is quite relevant. What would we do to have a situation where that individual could flourish? What would we do, so to speak, as a metaphor to the soil? How much sunlight? How much do we water? What are the nutrients that we need to provide so that they can not only grow, but they can flourish and achieve the better life that we are here to help them achieve? The idea, and I'll leave you with this last thought, and people have heard me say this, if we can coordinate and cooperate, you're going to hear a lot about mortality, disease, death, healthcare costs, etc. And that is true, that the lifestyles can lead to those things. But I want you to consider this phrase, and this was from a professor at Harvard many, many years ago. He said, consider it this way: we're not only about adding years to life, but life to years. And so with that, I hope that this gave you some inspiration for innovation in your area and sparked some thought, but at the minimal, I hope now you have an understanding of why you've been hearing so much about chronic disease, health, and in particular the lifestyles that can lead to those diseases or prevent those diseases and subsequent death. And again, considering how important it is that you're here and how great it is that you're here, considering how can we use our respective fields through Path to Plate, for example, and other programming efforts to take this head on. So thank you for that time. Dan, is there any questions for me right now, or people are free to contact me after this as well?
Yeah, let's go ahead and we'll open it up. We have about 2 or 3 minutes for questions, and so we'll open that up. So Mark, thank you. I hope that everyone on this Webex understands that we firmly believe that they, as part of Extension, are part of the answer, you know, as we go forward in this education. And going all the way to the top, Dr. Stover, this is a high emphasis that he is going to place, and his vision for what the entire agency or entire system is going to look like as we go forward. So this is, you know, we're at the cusp of hopefully expanding our coordination and our cooperation to affect a change in this area. I think Extension is built for that.
Yeah, I do too. And it's going to be fun too. It'll be challenging at times, but it's really a great opportunity.
So I'm going to open it up to any audio. I do have a couple other that were written down. So one question is are there county health statistics that they can get a hold of?
There is. If you go to countyhealthrankings.org, countyhealthrankings.org, you can type in your county and get the basic health statistics, and it will give you things related to diet, fruit and vegetable in particular, and physical activity, as well as smoking, obesity, diabetes, and other risk factors, including environmental efforts. And I'm glad you asked that. I meant to put that in at one point, and it just slipped my mind. So that's a great question.
So I'm typing in the chat just to make sure I get it right so everybody can see it. So it's countyhealthratings.com.
Yeah, rankings. Yeah, countyhealthrankings.org. I see Julie put that in the chat.
Okay, she's way ahead of me. All right, way to go, Julie.
Yeah, Julie.
So here's another one. Are these? I guess I'm going to ask probably Jenna about one. Are veggies and fruits created equal? But another one is are, you know, all those, you know, lifestyle, activity, are they additive, or if you do one, does that help mitigate the need to do another? So that's a question that I see.
Yeah, it is a common question, and I get it on the exercise world a lot. Like, hey, if I exercise this much, can I then eat whatever I want? And a lot of people choose exercise perhaps to offset so they can eat what they want. So the easiest answer in the short time we have, I think, Dan, is to say, and it is a great question, by the way, is, and this is me, so I tend to see things in spectrums. And so at one end, we gave a picture of ideal, right? Based on our knowledge now. Research may come out and change that, and that's okay. But as of now, we have a general picture of what's ideal that can be achieved in various ways. On the other end of the spectrum, consider our standard American diet, for example, inactivity, smoker, high centralized fat stored in around the organs in the heart. So if you have those two ends of the spectrum, the general response that I would recommend say to this question is, as you move from one end to the other, from the unhealthy end toward the ideal healthy end, you're going to see improvements. And you start somewhere, and if you can make changes to physical activity now, and diet's going to become harder. So from a behavior change education standpoint, we want people to get wins and get them early. And so start seeing the benefits early. And so instead of jumping to one end result, yes, you can see benefits piecing those things together with the goal of creating a whole healthy lifestyle eventually.
So let's see. So the one question is about the slides. Yes, Mark, we are going to ask that you give us a PDF version of the slides, and we'll put those only on the Champion site. And I'll be discussing the Champion site before we get off this conference call at the end. And so that will be included along with a recording of this particular presentation that we just did. So I'm recording this Webex as well.
Oh, I would have talked in a much deeper voice if I had known that.
You did great.
All right.
So somebody's asking, is it okay if I have fried okra? They didn't really ask it that way, but let's kind of, put that. So is it more than just one? Because I have a lot of people in the meat world saying I'm eating chicken, but we know 60% of the chicken is fried that's consumed in the U.S. So
Yeah.
does that, has that been looked at as far as, or is that an additive factor that needs to be considered?
Yeah, and there's been considerations. I know Dr. Anding will probably cover much of this, so I'll let her handle those sort of questions since that's her expertise. But I know there are factors, where we look at nutritional loss or not, going from whole to canned to frozen to if I heat it up in the microwave, how much of the nutrition is lost versus if I fry it. And then it's some balance, right? I could go buy a Snickers bar and get protein and vitamins and minerals, but also get other things too. And so every decision we make is going to have to be cost benefit analysis. But as to that specific one, and even more specifically fried okra, I will let Dr. Anding, but generally speaking, how we prepare the food is going to be important. And again, on a spectrum, there's going to be an ideal way and a possibility of deviating from that.
So we'll go to Dr. Anding here in just a minute, but I did want to just make a comment that Erica mentioned that the FCH agents often have county health reports that they would be willing to share with the other agents in the group. They don't all have them, but many of them do. So talk to your family and community health agents about health statistics. So that's good.
Good point. Thank you, Erica.
All right. So Jenna, now I think, because I know that right now Mark has to get to his next appointment. So thank you for spending time with us. And now we're going to hand it off to Dr. Anding again to talk about now more the nutritional side and specifics about nutrition. It looks like you're up and you're sharing and you're doing good. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jenna.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay, great.
If anybody's having any issues, please put that into your chat and keep the questions coming. All right.
Yeah, these are some great questions, and I'm not anti-fried okra or anti-French fry. It's just when we eat those foods every day, those may not have the best impacts on our health. So let me get this first slide up. So Dan asked me to talk about the role of diet in the prevention of chronic disease, and honestly, that's a whole semester course. So I took creative license to maybe just tweak this a little bit and talk about what we eat, what we should eat, and why we pick the foods that we do. So basically what we're going to talk about here, and definitely, bring your questions to the forefront. I want to hear the questions that you're getting from the field. We'll talk about the questions that you've already submitted to Dan. And I'm sorry, I've got a train rolling through campus right now, so I'll speak up a little bit. We're going to talk about what we eat. Mark did a great job talking about the link between diet and health. And I want to share a little bit with you what some of the research says about diet and health and the foods that we eat. Talk about our current food habits, and then we're going to compare it to current diet recommendations. So what are we eating versus what we should be eating? And then this is something that's always of interest to me. Why do we choose the foods that we do? We're all different. We have different backgrounds, experiences, different access to foods. And so we need to be mindful when we talk to others within our communities, and we talk about the role of diet and health, and give recommendations about the foods we eat and what we need to eat. We need to make sure that, we have access to those foods. So if you think about, those of us, I'm a little bit older than many of you. And I always remember my mom and my granny saying, you are what you eat. And that's something that's been around for a long time, that quote. And I got to wondering, well, where did it come from? And it's been traced, the start of it, to two different people. One is Jean-Briant Savrin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Kind of a Renaissance man, a Frenchman. He was a physician, a lawyer. He was a self-described foodie before foodie was cool. And he looked at, he thought that there was a link between what we eat and how we are and how we feel. Fast forward almost 100 years later, another gentleman, Victor Lindlar, he was probably an early radio personality and a health food writer, of all things. And interesting, he said 90% of the diseases known to man are caused by cheap foodstuffs. You are what you eat. So almost 100 years ago, people were giving the link between food and health. Well, I always want to see the data. So what does the research say? And so I looked at 5 years of data, and I just picked a handful of studies to share with you. And it gives you a taste of the types of research that's being done in this country and abroad. We know from research that diets rich in vegetables, fruits, and low-fat dairy foods can reduce our blood pressure. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, because hypertension is a concern in this country and in this state. Dietary influences, our diet influences the presence of healthy bacteria in our gut. So we have people in our department that look at the foods we eat and how it affects gut health. If you've been in the health food section, the pharmacy, you've seen prebiotics, probiotics, and all those dietary supplements are designed to help promote good gut health, the good bacteria in our body, because that plays a role in chronic disease and other aspects of our health. Another study found diets rich in omega-3 fatty acids may reduce the inflammation that's linked to heart disease. Omega-3 fatty acids are found in your fatty fish, your mackerel, your salmon, not deep fried catfish, unfortunately. But there is more research looking at the benefits of omega-3s. A Mediterranean diet is associated with a lower risk of developing symptoms of, get this, depression over time. Again, the foods we eat can impact now our mental health. This was a study I was reading last week where they took some individuals, some older adults, and they gave them the equivalent of a cup of blueberries a day, and they put them through a series of tests to assess cognitive function. And they found that compared to those that got a placebo or fake blueberries, in this case, those that were eating the blueberries a day had some improved cognition. So I took a hard look at that one. And then, kind of circling back to French fries and fried okra, a study published a few years back found that consuming fried foods 4 or more times a week was linked to development of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Now, was it the fried food? Or was it the extra calories? Was it the foods we ate with those fried foods? We're not too sure, but when they were able to kind of tease out other possible factors, the idea that these fried foods are linked is something that we should take notice of. So bottom line, what we eat does impact our health, both physical, and now more and more we're starting to see the link between diet and mental health. And PubMed is a national search engine for accessing this Medline database, and there's over 26 million publications in this database. And in the last 5 years, so I just put in, show me what's been there for the last 5 years, and my keywords were diet, chronic disease, and human. because no offense, I don't care what happens in rats. But we had over 15,000 papers that were published. So we're definitely looking at this role of diet and health, and there's more and more research coming out. So I hate to say stay tuned, but stay tuned, because one of the things about nutrition and other aspects of health is nutrition is continuously evolving. The diet recommendations I gave as a registered dietitian 20 plus years ago are not the same recommendations that I give today. And it's because we know new information. We've done different research, and our recommendations change. But regardless, people are definitely looking for information about diet and health. And I would, ask y'all to think about, just to yourself, within the last week, how many of you have gotten on the internet or WebMD or someplace and looked for information related to diet and health? If you want to raise your hand, you can do that. You may not have even wanted to look for information, but if you're on Facebook or Instagram, in your feeds, you may have gotten some information. Well, as you can probably imagine, not all information is the same. And this is where the Path to the Plate program is going to be so instrumental in keeping our clientele focused on what is real, what's the science base, where's the trusting information. There are all kinds of organizations on the internet. Some are good, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, American Institute for Cancer Research. Those are good organizations. The Center for Science in the Public Interest. If I had to use a political spectrum where, liberal or very conservative about food, CSPI is kind of on that right side. They are definitely about eating vegetables and fruits, and they're the ones that told us many years ago fettuccine Alfredo was heart attack on a plate, and all the buttered popcorn we get from the movie theater is going to kill us. We see and we've heard about Food Babe and Dr. Oz and the information that they're presenting to people. And I'll tell you, it's slick, but it's not accurate. And sometimes it's misleading, and it can be borderline alarmist. And that's what we've got to think about. So within Extension, we typically promote the dietary guidelines. These are the national recommendations that are written by health and nutrition experts. It is a panel. It is an esteemed honor to be picked on this panel. It's revised every 5 years, so they get the panel together. The guidelines are probably 1.5 years, 2 years in the making. They comb through all the research that's been done the previous 5 years to see, okay, what are the trends? What has changed? The one thing about the dietary guidelines is their recommendations are based on what I'm going to call a preponderance of the evidence. It's not based on one study, and it's not based on one kind of study. They look at the integrity of the research, how rigorous it was, looking at the results, is there any bias? And they put it all together, and then they form the recommendations. And these recommendations have 3 goals. 1, promote health. 2, prevent chronic disease. And 3, help people reach and maintain a healthy weight. And you get back to what Mark said earlier, if we can do those 3 things, our healthcare costs could be drastically reduced. Now, you and I don't see the dietary guidelines as they're typically written. We see them in the form of My Plate, and I'll get that in a minute. But one thing about the dietary guidelines is they form the basis for many of our federal nutrition programs. So school lunch program, school breakfast program, WIC, all of those Their recommendations, the foods that are served, are based in part on these dietary recommendations. And when we look at the key recommendations, some of them are similar to what Mark has said, eating a variety of vegetables, with some emphasis on dark green, red, orange, and orange vegetables, as well as legumes. Eating more fruit, and that's whole fruit, not juice. Making sure that, the grain foods that we eat, half of them should be a whole grain. This is that shift to get us away from some of those highly processed, more refined grains, which don't have near the nutritional value that whole grains do. Looking at fat-free or low-fat dairy products or fortified soy beverages. This gets into a little bit of rub with the meat people, with the milk people, because soy is often called soy milk, and whether or not the dairy cattle, the dairy people like that. I think there's been some debate at the congressional level whether or not soy milk should actually be called milk. I think the jury's still out on that, but we're going to call it soy milk for now. Eating a variety of protein foods. This does include lean meat as well as poultry, but also eggs, legumes, nuts, and seeds, as well as soy products. I would probably even throw quinoa in there because it is a good source of protein. Focusing on oils as opposed to solid fats, limiting our saturated fat, trans fats, added sugars, and sodium, and then alcohol in moderation. And I would even add after that, if at all. Please don't say that, hey, Anding said I can go and drink. What I'm saying is, if you do drink alcohol, do so in moderation. There's been a little shift in the dietary guidelines over the last couple iterations, where we are giving more focus to added sugars, because that is a source sometimes of hidden calories that we don't think about. Less than 10% of our calories a day from saturated fats, no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium. This is equal to about a teaspoon of salt a day. Now, that doesn't mean that's how much you get to put on your food, because there's a lot of sodium found in our canned foods and many of our processed foods. One thing that's different from this iteration is there's not a recommended amount of total fat. Earlier recommendations for the dietary guidelines had no more than up to 30-45% of your calories from fat. If you notice, they quietly took that off the table. And it's because we know that not all fats are created equal. There are some healthy fats. And, at the end of the day, fat along with protein does give us satiety. And there are some that vote for that higher amount of fat, as long as our calorie intake is kept in check. That's a whole other discussion, but I'm just going to leave that here right now. I will also say that not everybody is in agreement with the dietary guidelines. There are some people that think it's too heavy in carbohydrates. It still promotes too many refined carbohydrates. Others think, we need to get rid of this whole idea of limiting saturated fat. But right now, this is what we're going with. Again, the dietary guidelines are based on a preponderance of the evidence. For 2020 dietary guidelines, they may look different. Who knows? Maybe the recommendation on saturated fat, maybe that won't be an issue. I don't know. We've got some research here on the A&M campus that are looking at saturated fat, but I still think the jury is still out before I'm going to run out and make a bold new recommendation. So Mark kind of alluded to the dietary guidelines that you and I see. It's often portrayed as my plate. Now, as a nutrition educator, most people don't follow my plate. Most people don't make their plate look like this. Heck, some people don't even eat off plates anymore. So this can be a little bit difficult you can talk about it, you can educate this on people, but at the end of the day, they want to know, okay, what does this really mean? What should I be eating? And if you read the dietary guidelines report, they talk about 2 different diets that the dietary guidelines really align with very well. The first one is the DASH diet, and DASH stands for the Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension. This diet's been around for a while, and there's a great body of research to show that for people who are having challenges controlling their blood pressure, this is a great first step in trying to get it under control. And it's got some other benefits as well. But now here's the challenge. If you're following the DASH diet, you're looking at every day 6 to 8 servings of grains, at least 3 of them are whole grains, 4 to 6 servings of fruit, 4 to 6 servings of vegetables. So this gets back to what Mark was talking about earlier, 7 to 10, this is going 8 to 12. 2 to 4 servings of low or no-fat dairy, 1 to 2 servings of lean meat, fish, or poultry. Not a lot, it is more plant-based, but there is dairy and there is meat in there. And then per week, 3 to 6 servings of nuts, seeds, and legumes, and only 2 to 4 servings of fats and sweets. What is a serving of fat and sweet? Well, that's that butter that you put on your bread or the syrup you put on your pancake. So you're not getting a lot of sweets. But again, what we know about approaches to controlling hypertension, diets rich in potassium, calcium, the nuts are giving us healthy fats. Those can all be helpful in helping us to control our blood pressure. And in fact, the American Heart Association recommends the DASH diet for the non-pharmacological management of hypertension. And I know people who have been bordering on having to take medication to control their high blood pressure. They've given this DASH diet a really good try, and they've been able, maybe not totally prevent themselves from having to go on medication, but they've been able to stave it off for a while. So again, this is a good approach. Other research studies have found that it's linked with lower total and LDL cholesterol levels. Well, that's great for our heart health, may reduce our heart disease risk by as much as 20%. And then other studies have been looking at insulin sensitivity and markers for inflammation, and they found that this diet, and probably because it is rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and healthy fats, are helping to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation in the body. So this has multiple benefits. Now, with the Mediterranean diet, this is it's not a single diet like the DASH diet is, because the Mediterranean diet is reflective of all those countries that border the Mediterranean Sea. And they are different culturally, but they do share similar characteristics with respect to the diet. And the benefits of this Mediterranean diet were reported over 40 years ago. And this way of eating, I probably shouldn't even call it a diet. This way of eating continues to be heavily researched for its health benefits. The nice thing about this one is if you're following a Mediterranean style way of eating and you eat out a lot, you can follow this one a little bit easier. With the characteristics of a Mediterranean style of eating are pretty simple, but you do base every meal on vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, as well olive oil, beans, nuts, legumes, and seeds. We don't use salt, but we're using herbs to give spice to our food. Their goal is 7 to 10 servings of vegetables and fruits a day. And I'm going to be honest, guys, that's a lot. For those of you that have been around a while, if you remember the 5-a-day program, most of us couldn't get to 5 a day. And when you saw the statistics that Mark shared as far as how many servings of vegetables and fruits we're getting in Texas, it's we're not even close to making a step towards following this recommendation. And I need to follow up with Mark because I would like to find out what is the most common vegetable and fruit consumed. My guess it's something like bananas, potatoes, iceberg lettuce, those types of vegetables and fruits. Those typically are the most common. We want to eat fish and seafood at least 2 times a week. I'm going to be honest, when I try to follow this way of eating, this is where I fail because I'm not a big fish or seafood type of person. We want to consume poultry, eggs, cheeses, and yogurt in moderate amounts. We're going to use olive and canola oil instead of butter or margarine. Again, that's that shift to healthier fats. I really haven't said cut out a lot of fat. I'm just shifting to the type of fat. Red meats, sweets, and processed foods are allowed, but we just want to eat them less often. So nobody's saying don't eat red meat, don't eat processed meats. But what we are saying is, okay, let's look at it in the context of the total diet. And then wine in moderation, if at all. And what we know from the Mediterranean diet can help reduce the risk of diabetes in adults, may slow the rate of cognitive decline. I'm in that 5th decade of life, so cognition is starting to be important to me. Reduces risk for heart disease, reduction in risk of biomarkers for inflammation, and these biomarkers can be C-reactive protein and some other markers. And one study looked at aging and the impact of the Mediterranean diet, and they looked at basically DNA and our genes, the DNA markers, and what they found was on these strands of DNA, at the ends of these strands are something called telomeres, and they are a genetic indicator of cell aging. And those that follow a Mediterranean style diet had longer telomeres, and so they weren't aging as quickly as those that weren't following this diet. So again, this is just more and more information that's coming out about these types of eating styles. And then if you really want to get into it, researchers at Rush University combined these 2 diets and came up with the MIND diet. This is the Mediterranean Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. So this is now we're getting into cognition. And this diet, this way of eating, when you combine both, has been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease anywhere from 35 to 53%. It goes back to how well you follow the diet, of course. Has been shown to slow cognitive decline in older adults. And I think it is easier to follow compared to the DASH and the Mediterranean diet. So here is what the MIND diet looks like. So every day you're going to eat 3 or more servings of whole grains. So again, we're stepping away from some of those heavily processed carbohydrates. We're going to eat servings of other vegetables, and I'll get to that in just a second. 1 or less tablespoons of butter or margarine a day. So again, getting rid or cutting back on those saturated fats, a glass of wine or alcohol. And when I say a glass of wine, I'm only talking about 5 ounces. So not a big glass, small glass. Every week, we're going to eat 6 or more servings of dark green leafy vegetables. Start thinking of salad. 2 or more servings of berries. This is blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries. A lot of interesting information coming out about the whole issue of berries and the impact on our health. 3 or less servings of red meat products per week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, you guys pick. 1 or more servings of fish. Going to go out on a limb and say it's not fried. 2 or more servings of poultry. Again, probably not fried. Legumes, nuts, and a little bit less on the cheese or the fast food. Some interesting studies that have been done looking at inflammation in the body. One of the foods that comes up often is fried foods. and fast foods. Many of our fast foods are fried, and so this is where the recommendation to cutting back on the fast food comes in. And I just want to show you with this study, we found that this was a group of older adults. They were living in a senior community facility. They were free living. They cooked their own meals. They encouraged them to follow the MIND diet. They followed them over 10 years. Those that followed it the most basically had the brain function, the cognitive function of being 7.5 years younger than those who didn't. And I thought that was pretty powerful, that the food we eat can impact potentially cognitive decline. So take a second and ask yourself, how well do you think you follow any aspect of the dietary guidelines? I'm going to be honest, probably 95% of us don't follow them. It's hard. Many adults, though, are taking steps to be healthy. And again, this is where our programs in family and community health are very relevant. Path to the Plate is very relevant. This is from a national survey done by the International Food Information Council. They surveyed 1,000 adults over 18 across the United States. And what they're doing more often, they're drinking more water instead of other fluids. They're trying to eat more vegetables. They're trying to consume smaller portions. So they are making some steps in trying to get healthier. But when we look at what we should be eating and what we really are, we're not quite there with respect to following my plate. Half our plate should be vegetables and fruits. We're not quite there yet. We're doing pretty good on the grains, still heavy on the protein side, and not only less than half of Americans are even including dairy type foods often. So a lot of us don't get enough of these dairy type foods, and that can play a role in our calcium and our bone health later down the road. One measure of how well we're eating is called the Healthy Eating Index, and it's a numeric score that is given to diets, and basically researchers will compare our diets to the dietary guidelines for Americans, and each aspect of the guidelines are given a point value. If you're interested in how it's scored, just email me. But it's kind of like a report card or an exam grade for how well we eat. Would anybody like to take a stab at what they think the average score is? It can range from 0 to 100. How well do you think we might be eating? Anybody want to take a stab? Okay, here we go. The average score is 59. We start out good when we're infants, when we're from 2 to 5, although that's still a D in my book. And by the time we get to be 65, we're like, well, gee, maybe I better start eating a little better, but we're still at maybe a solid D. It's not a D minus like when we're 2 to 5, but the overall score is 59. And when my son brings home a 59, he gets the lecture from me that's an F. That's not going to fly. So we've got some work to do here, and I will tell you these scores have been consistent now for several years. When they've looked at National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey results. When we look at our common habits, on average, we eat out, depending on our income level, anywhere from 4.2 to 5.5 times a week. We're eating out a lot. We're eating less vegetables and fruits today than we were in the previous years. Now, USDA and IFIC think this trend is going to reverse itself. Time will tell. The top 3 vegetables sold in the United States are potatoes, tomatoes, and onions. The top 3 fruits are bananas, apples, and oddly enough, grapes. And I wonder if it's because these are not portable and you can eat those pretty easy on the go. The average American drinks about 38 gallons of soda a year. So think about if you got a gallon of milk in your refrigerator right now, visualize 38 of those, and that's how many gallons of soda the average American drinks every year. 37% of the added sugar in our diet is coming from sugar-sweetened beverages. That's a lot of empty calories that we don't need to be drinking, and it's coming from energy drinks, full sweetened sodas, sweet tea, juice drinks, not juice, but juice drinks, and other beverages. Even though 3/4 of us say that we're trying to limit our added sugar intake. So we're trying, but we still have a ways to go. And most of us are going to snack at least once a day. And snacking isn't bad, it's just how often and what we're snacking with. Just a few other trends. I want to highlight a couple. I think this one's interesting. The amount of time that's spent on meal preparation and cleanup per day is 21 minutes for men and 50 minutes for women. Now, Dr. Hale, I don't know if this means that men are more efficient, or maybe there's a difference in the types of foods being prepared, but it's just interesting. Nearly half of U.S. consumers that were surveyed by IFIC say they avoid GMO foods. So this is something as Path to the Plate champions, you will probably get some questions about GMOs. 1 in 3 adults say that their diet is based on information from family and friends. They'll tell you that their family and friends may not be the most knowledgeable, but that's where they're getting their source. And the use of the supermarket as a primary choice for shopping continues to fall. As a young child, I would go every Saturday with my mom to our neighborhood grocery store because that was the place where you went to get your food. Nowadays, you can go shop at big box grocery stores, dollar stores, Dollar Tree, Dollar General. More and more of them are adding some decent food options. Our big box discount stores and even convenience stores. So again, all of this plays a role in the foods that we eat. Other things that drive our food choices, taste. That continues to be the number one. If it doesn't taste good, we're not going to eat it. And I would even go a step further if there's the perception that it doesn't taste good. People aren't going to eat it. The second biggest driver is price. And I hear people say, well, Jenna, you know, cheap food is not as healthy, and that's true. And then I hear, but healthy food is too expensive. And I think the answer to that is, well, it could be. If you're living in a food desert and you don't have access to healthy foods, you're right. Though the foods that you might have access to are going to be a little more pricey. But price continues to play a role. Healthfulness. You know, 10 years ago, healthfulness wasn't even in the mix as far as the foods that people are choosing. I'm encouraged to see that this is now bubbled up to number 3, because number 3 used to be convenience. But convenience is still important. And if you don't get that, go to your nearest big grocery store. I am within 3 miles north and south of me of an HEB. And at one HEB, there's a lot of convenience foods that are very, very healthy because The vegetables are pre-cut. I don't have to cut up anything. I can just go buy them and cook them. I can go to another HEB that's closer to where a lot of students live, and some of the convenience foods may or may not be as healthy. They're healthy in there, but the first thing I see when I walk into that HEB is the takeout pizza. So, oh yeah, the ready to eat. Matt just made a comment about the ready to eat meals. And you know what, Matt, there's some good healthy options there that, you know, I kind of like. Everything is already chopped up. All I have to do is put it in the oven. My husband can have his salmon. I can have my food. Having said all that, they do have some less than healthier options, but you know, a treat every now and then is good. And then the fourth is how food is produced. And I will tell you, this is becoming more and more important to consumers, especially younger consumers, your millennials, your generation, I don't know now, what are we on, Z, but people want to know, they want that connection with whoever's producing the food. Again, this is some data from the Food Marketing Institute. This isn't quite 2 years old, but they asked, you know, what health claims do you look for on the package when purchasing a product? And the top 10 are listed right here. They want low sugar, low sodium, no artificial ingredients. They're looking for the whole grain label, no trans fats, which for me personally, I don't think it's an issue anymore because many of our food products, the producers have taken the trans fats out of these processed foods. No preservatives, no added hormones, natural, non-GMO. They're looking for this, and they're looking for this because it's important to them, and it's important to them because of the information they have been given up until now. Whether that information is accurate or not, that's the subject of another discussion. But they're also looking for things like certified organic, low carb, cage-free, gluten-free, antioxidant-rich, and even free range. And we've got a whole program on what do these labels mean and how do we communicate this information to the public that I'm sure Julie and Dan will share with you later. How food produced is definitely of interest to our consumers. Last year, when the Food Information Council did their annual survey, these were the things that popped up most. Consumers want to know, what are the ingredients? They want to know where their food comes from. This comes back to the cool or the country of origin label. They want to know, where did it come from? How was it produced? Was it produced GMO, organic? Is it fair trade? They want more transparency. They want to see how it's produced. They want to get that connection with their producer, with the farmer. How many ingredients are in the food product? Not so much, well, they want to know what is in it and how many ingredients. And I'm not sure why, if they think that the more ingredients, the less wholesome it is. Sustainability continues to be important. They want to know, is food being produced in an environmentally sustainable way? And is it being produced with animal welfare in mind? Don't shoot the messenger. This is just what the research says. And I think these are good talking points as we are out with consumers and we talk to them about how food is produced in this country. These are the questions that you might be getting. And I would just say that the challenges that we face as educators are the same ones that we face as consumers. As an educator, we're competing against multiple sources of information. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, Snap, Instagram, all of those, you know, every day there's something coming out, and a lot of it is not true. Some of it may be, but when you're being flooded with all different types of information, you've got to be able to discriminate what is truth and what is not. Customers may not get the whole story. And what I mean by here is sometimes researchers will go public with their data, or you'll see the breaking news about a particular study, and we only get, the 30-second snippet of the study, and it's usually what they did and what they found, but we don't get the whole story, if I can quote the late Paul Harvey, or the rest of the story. And these are things we've got to keep in mind. So, when I see somebody promoting, oh, look at this keto recipe, or this keto diet is going to help me lose weight, well, that may not be true. And then the other challenge that we see is sometimes information plays into consumer fears. And I'm sure this is something that you're going to be, if you haven't been approached with, you will. Over the holidays, I had an agent email me because somebody had heard that there was, I must just use the popular term, Roundup residues in oats and oatmeal. And this person wanted to know, well, should I just throw out my Cheerios? Because they were concerned. This past week, I saw another thing come across the feed where, like, I can't pronounce it, Dan, so I'm just going to have to say Roundup, was found some residues in wine and I think beer. Well, let's take a step back and let's see, one, is this accurate? There might be other pesticide residues in the foods that we eat, but those pesticide residues are very controlled by the EPA. And honestly, I think we're focusing on Roundup because it's been in the media lately. But residues are so controlled. If these residues exceeded any kind of a standard limit, that stuff would be pulled off the shelves. And people say, well, I don't want any pesticide residues, and that's why I'm going to eat organic. Well, guess what? Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's going to be pesticide free, because there are organic pesticides that can be used. And just because I'm growing something that's organic, but my neighbor's not, doesn't mean I might not get runoff or wind drift, and there may be pesticides that impact my quote unquote organic crops. So these are things that we deal with personally as consumers, because all this information is coming to us from many sources. But as educators, you've got to face this too. So before we talk about the questions that you guys sent in, I just want to reiterate a few things. And Dan had sent out a paper from JAMA, I think, earlier this week. And this is something that we get as nutrition educators. One, research studies are not all the same. A survey of what people say they do and a double-blind randomized clinical control trial are at different ends of the spectrum when it comes to research. And when somebody tells you about a research study or this research that was done, first thing I always say is, wow, that's interesting. Tell me how that research was done. Because if it wasn't done with rigor, I'm not going to put a lot of stock in their results, and I'm not going to put a lot of stock in their conclusions and how they think we should be eating because of it. Second, one study does not or should not lead to bold diet recommendations. Again, there's people that don't like the dietary guidelines. In fact, there was one question that was submitted, they're not revised every 10 years, they're revised every 5 years, and it's based on a preponderance of the evidence. In human studies, there are a lot of confounding variables that we have to, and I say try to control, but sometimes we can't. When I see studies done from people in other countries, I may not be able to extrapolate their results to the people in this country because we're different. We're culturally, we're genetically, we're ethnically, racially so much more diverse than other countries. Our environments are different. We're not in a country where we can walk every day to the store, or we have access, to a plentiful supply of fresh vegetables and fruits. We have differences in physical activity. In some other countries where they walk everywhere because either gas is too expensive or they just don't own cars, they're probably more physically active than we are in this country. The other thing I just want to reiterate, we eat food, not nutrients. And so you might hear a research study that comes across about, oh, this latest vitamin. Well, we typically don't eat just vitamin, I'll just say C, for example. We eat vitamins as a whole. We eat more than just vitamin C unless we're taking a vitamin C tablet. But we eat food, not just individual nutrients. And I do believe it's about our total diet over time, not just one food or one day. So, I'm pushing 54 with a short stick, and I'm still a work in progress. I have my moments where I don't eat as healthy as I should. Thank you, Dan, for asking me to do this, because it has reiterated my need to get a little healthier. But it's about what we do over time. There's a reason why some of these diseases are called chronic. They take a while to develop. The good news is we can get it under control. And then somebody asked about, is it just diet or exercise? I'm going to tell you up front, I don't think so. Both are very much important, but we do have to look at our alcohol consumption, smoking, stress, and even sleep. The research that's coming out about stress and inflammation, lack of sleep and inflammation, and this whole aspect of inflammation on our health is really interesting. So I'm going to challenge you guys today, just take a deep breath and think about where you're eating and how does it compare to some of the things I've shared with you today. And just pick one thing. Mark talks about moving the needle, and I'm in 100% agreement with that. Our diets didn't get the way they were overnight, and they're not going to change overnight. So if you're one of those that maybe only eats one vegetable and one fruit a day, tomorrow, try to go for 2. And I don't care how much, just try to get one more, just one more. If you can do a dark green, a yellow, or an orange vegetable, yay. But, if you're not doing anything, just do something. Again, take a look at berries and other whole fruits, not juice. Choose less processed carbohydrates and grain foods. A lot of people are on these low carb diets. I think we could do just as good if we didn't look at how much carbohydrates we were eating, but the type of carbohydrate. We eat a lot of heavily processed carbohydrates that really add a lot of calories, but not a whole lot of nutritional value. Reduce your consumption of sugar sweetened beverages, whether it's soda, sweet tea, energy drinks. If you're a sweet tea fanatic and you really don't know if you can do this, try half and half. Start with half sweet tea and half regular tea, or 3/4 sweet tea and 1/4 unsweet, and gradually wean yourself off of the sweet tea in favor of some other beverages. And then reduce your consumption of fried foods and sweets. Again, honestly, if you started doing a few of these, you will be making that step towards following the DASH or the Mediterranean style of eating. And having said all that, because I know this is hard, I'm also a big believer in rewarding yourself every now and then. Now, every now and then does not mean every day. It may be, hey, I've been following this way of eating really good. Maybe I've lost 10 pounds. I want to celebrate. I'm not a big fan of using food as a way of celebrating, because we can always find a reason to celebrate if there's chocolate involved. But a treat every now and then is okay. So let's talk about some questions that we received from the field. Give me a second, Dan, so I can pull up the spreadsheet that we got. Are there any questions so far?
I just wanted to comment on your celebrations. Yeah, it's President's Day could be a celebration, so yeah, we got to be careful. I actually have run into that where I found a lot of holidays and a lot of special events because I was limiting food to only those days.
Friday is a celebration for some people. I'm just saying.
That's good. So
Um,
one question that came across is, we keep saying fruits and vegetables, but are they created equal? They have to be eaten, both of them every day.
So here's the thing. They give us different nutrients. They're both healthy. If you're watching your weight and maybe your blood sugar, I would lean more towards the vegetable side because they don't have as much fructose, they don't have as much sugar, and they're lower in calories. Fruit every now and then, a fruit is fine if you're not watching your weight. I would again caution how much, because it is a source of calories. People don't realize 8 ounces of orange juice is 120 calories, whereas I could eat an orange and get half of the amount in calories, and I'm getting fiber and other phytonutrients that probably didn't get in the juice. So if you're going to eat fruit, go for whole fruits because you get the fiber and the other things. But anything is better than nothing. If you're at a 0 and you really, you lean more towards fruit, then start with the fruit, but then I'm going to challenge you to start working in the vegetables.
Yeah, so Erica just says you can end up consuming 13 to 14 extra calories in beverages, if you don't pay attention. So that's a good comment. Goes back to what you said. What I really enjoy is just hearing how, from a professional standpoint, how you address us, and in addition, then how we can address our stakeholders that we are in contact with regards to these different issues.
Mainly, so I'm just going to go down some because we've got some time. There was some concern about red meat as part of a healthy diet. Red meat can be part of a healthy diet. Most of the research that's out there, and red meat does, it's a source of iron, it's a source of zinc, it's a source of B12. Those are nutrients that are definitely important to us. We recommend, if you're going to eat red meat, choose the leaner cuts. But I don't know, I'm sure there's some out there, but for me personally as a dietitian, I don't tell people don't eat red meat. Because it's not going to happen in this state, and 2, it's not sound in science, and 3, I think you set people up for failure when you start giving those type of very overly ambitious recommendations.
Right. And then, a lot of it I look at empty calories versus nutrient-filled, meals that you have, and of course red meat provides a lot of nutrients at a relatively low calorie versus what you might use to replace it.
That's right.
As a food item. Absolutely.
It's not just one part of your plate. It's what does the whole plate look like? So added sugars. So added sugars are sugars that are added to a food that normally would not have it. So probably a great example of a food with added sugars, Lucky Charms. There's a reason why they're magically delicious, because they've got a lot of sugar in them. Whereas fruit has sugar, but it's natural sugars. And so what we're finding is from research, or there is a a consensus among some health professionals that we eat too many foods with added sugars. And these added sugars are a source of extra calories, and that's one thing that is causing us to have issues with our weight and become overweight.
So I get, Jenna, we're going to have to move on to
Okay.
some housekeeping stuff, but we will see Jenna again at the Central Texas face-to-face meeting. She'll be spending considerable time with us there talking about food labels, as well as continuing to in this nutrition dialogue and how we convey that to the consumers and how we talk about the plate part of Path to the Plate. So thank you very much, Jen. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank y'all for being involved in this endeavor. Y'all have a good day.
So we do have about 10 or 15 minutes left to talk about just some housekeeping with regards to what's happening next. And so, Julie, I'll entertain you to come on and unmute yourself and just join in this discussion. Basically, hopefully you read through the document. They're just talking about in the application what we're looking for in champion agents and what those responsibilities are for champion agents. So, Julie, anything that you want to say with regards to that?
Sure, Dan. Yeah, if you remember back to the application process, sort of the role and a responsibility of the champion agent was sort of defined, but we want to cover a little bit about, because I know you may have some questions, so we want to cover a little bit about, what is my role as a champion agent once I go through this training? What do you expect of me? Really, I think the greatest expectation that we have of our champion agents is to be able to communicate to the consumers, to the clientele, youth or adults, really that connection between agriculture and health. And so I think as you look at your role, I think that is your role, to communicate that connection. And I think you can do that through current programs, new programs that might be created because of this involvement in this program, and then through partnerships. So I think as you move forward in the process of this training, think about ways you can integrate that connection piece and current things that you're already doing, and also maybe how you can partner with others to create new and innovative ideas of how to make that connection between ag and health for adults and for youth. I think that's important to think about both age groups. And so really that, to me, if you think about the defined role, that's it. When you also think about additional roles, we're going to ask you to really to be mentors to other agents that aren't in the cohort, this current cohort, or weren't in the previous cohort. Really sort of be mentors for those agents and help, if they have questions or they have concerns or they have clientele with questions, to say, hey, here's where we've learned Path to the Plate. Here's some resources that we have. Really kind of help guide and direct those that haven't been through the champion training. Ideally, we would love to have everyone in 1 year trained as champions, but that's just not feasible. So really, you become that mentor and that role model for others. And then as we move through, we're going to ask, you for assistance in developing some new agent resources. One, we're going to ask you to help us identify what's needed. What do you need on the ground at the local level to really help make that connection between ag and health? And what do those resources look like? And how can we supply those resources to agents, and really helping develop those? When I say develop, it might be, for instance, in the past, with some of the Youth Expo guides, helping to develop the talking points, identifying the tics, things like that. But more than anything, first and foremost, what do you need? And then once those resources are developed, we really are going to depend on you to be peer reviewers for many of those things. We want to make sure what we're producing is going to be relevant to your programs, relevant to your clientele, and really telling the story and helping to make that connection through messaging that's going to be valuable to you and to those that you're serving in your counties. And so those are really, again, we look at the overall role. I think those are the key roles of this program and for you. And another role is really to keep Dan and I informed of what we're doing well and what we need to do better. One thing I think we'll both tell you is that we want you to be honest with us through this process and help guide us and direct us and tell us what's working and what's not, because that's the only way we make it better. Matt made some points here on the chat box, is taking all those opportunities that you can to really integrate ag and health. and making an interdisciplinary approach. That's what, from the beginning, Pat to the Plate has not been an ag program. It's not been an FCH program. It's not been a 4-H program. It's been an AgriLife program where we integrate all of those disciplines together to really convey that message. And pointing folks back to that research, and really A&M is that non-biased research, as Matt said there in the chat, is definitely what we're doing. You will find that you're going to have opinions and biases, very strong ones, on certain subject matter. But through this process, we're going to teach you how to kind of step back and really take those biases away, and really put that research-based information in front, because that's what you're going to depend on to get the messages across. It's difficult, and those of you who know me know that I have my opinion. If you don't believe me, just ask me. But you have to take a step back, and for some of us, sometimes that's difficult, but we're going to teach you that process as well. So again, just making that connection through that relevant, current research-based information, making that connection between ag and health, and helping people understand that our food supply is the safest in the world, that the technologies and the process we have in place are for a purpose, and that purpose is to keep that food supply safe and nutritious for the people that we feed, not only in the United States, but in the world. So, and I know, Erica, yes, not me at all, but that I would have an opinion, but yes. So those are really sort of the roles and responsibilities. And I think as you work through and go through the trainings, we'll discuss this at every training, and what your expectations are. I think it'll become more clear. We're not going to throw you out there to the wolves. We promise you that. We've learned a lot. The first cohort, bless your hearts, I know some of you on here, y'all were, for a better term, the guinea pigs for us. And so we've learned a lot about the process and protocols that we need to put in place to make sure that we're supplying you with the resources that you need to do your job, and to really become that educator for Path to the Plate. So, all right, Dan, what else?
Hey, no, that's great. Yeah, you did a great job just talking through. And if you have any questions about some of the things, or want to go back to see, exactly what Julie was talking about, it is in, again, that draft that we sent with regards to the application. Some of what you talked about was there. I just showed this slide because there is an overview now of Path to the Plate that you have access to, and it's found on the agent site. We'll talk about the champion agent site here in a minute, but you can access that, and it talks about the mission and the objectives and what Path to the Plate is. And, basically our goal is to connect agriculture with consumers. And my BHAG is I want to be one of the #1 sources, whether it's through you or through other outlets within social media or websites, of being a primary source that people would go to find out information about food and the healthfulness of food, nutrition, and how that food came to them as it went through from the production system, from the farm and ranch, all the way through to the consumer. So, as you talk about it, we do have a great group of already champion agents out there. Please, they are available to you for any questions that you might have. And I've come to really respect and really honor these people that were in the 2017 cohort. They are doing a great job, and they are also a resource for you as you go forward into this 2019 training experience.
And one thing I might add, Dan, real quickly, on that first cohort, if you notice in that list, there are a couple that were agents at the time they started the cohort, but they are now RPLs. And so I think you'll realize that, there's an understanding from the RPL level as well. In fact, all the RPLs went through the training and were there most of the time. And so don't be afraid to ask your RPLs questions as well, because they understand the process.
Okay, and also the district extension administrators were involved in that as well, so they can help you too. So what does the training entail? Well, you're already through the first of 6 of our meetings. 3 of those will be a lot more involved in this one, but we'll have a Webex. Those Webexes our goal of them are to help prepare us for where we're going to go in some cases. In this case, it was to prepare us in our thinking as we go to farms and food processing facilities. And we talk to people about GMOs and pesticides and all the other things that go along with that. what are those things that we need to be paying attention to as we go to and think about as we go through these tours at these various locations. So there's 3 Webex trainings and 3 in-person trainings you're required to be at those trainings. The Webex will be recorded, so that is a possibility, but you have to go to the in-person trainings. If you cannot, you need to tell us now, and we'll just find another person to take your role. So those are required, the in-person trainings. So, we'll be going throughout the year, and I will be sending you, like I sent you this article talking about nutrition research. I'll be sending you those periodically, and so will Julie and others. If you have items that you want us to think about and consider and send to the group, please send those to me, and I will forward those. We'll have discussions about them and forward those. What we're asking you is that after the in-person trainings that you actually do something with those trainings, at least 2 Path to the Plate related activities. And as you can see from the list there, it is a fairly, wide open list. We just would like for you to tell us what you did with those, whether it's doing a radio program, even if it's a 40-second radio program, or if you train volunteers or you talked about what you did, showed pictures or videos of what you did to your youth groups. That fits very well. And finally, at the end, you'll be required for the next planning year to complete a Path to the Plate program on Texas data. So those are the elements of that. So
Dave, real quickly,
yeah, go ahead.
let me interject on the if you'll go back that one slide on the
You bet.
Following those 3 in-person sessions, doing something with those. Let me just add that doesn't mean that you have to do those alone. That you actually could, if you're in, in your district, there's, other people in the cohort that you want to partner with on some multi-county things, or just involving the other staff members in your office. Maybe they're not going through this champion training, but they could certainly be a part of those educational activities that you're doing after the in-person session. So just let me add that it doesn't have to be all by your lonesome. You can actually recruit partners on this.
Yeah, and even if they're not Path to the Plate champion cohort, that's even better. Where you're already extending, if you have an agent or that's whether it's an ag agent in your county or if it's a family community health agent in the next county, you can group together. You're actually doing exactly what we're looking for champions to do as we go forward. That's really good. And Julie, would you keep an eye on the chat? For some reason, I can't see the chat when I'm in this mode.
Sure.
So this gives you an idea. Our next events will be in April, and we will be going to South Texas. As you look across, you'll see we're going to spend time in South Texas, in the Panhandle, and in Central Texas. We really feel like it's not only important to look at different foods, but look at different challenges in the huge state that we have in just the production of food itself. And so by going to these different areas, we'll cover different topics, of course, but at the same time, we're going to see a whole different type of agriculture as we go from one place to another. And so I'm really excited about being able to go to those 3 locations. And I appreciate the RPLs and helping us kind of identify those locations and then come up with a kind of a template as to what we're going to do as we go forward. Anything, Julie, so far in chat?
The only question we had was how to best communicate the programs that they conduct, how to communicate those with us. I think I've got 2 ideas, and one thing we might want to create, Dan, is sort of a link for them to drop in that. But more than anything, you can email it to us. Just email us a note. Hey, I've done this. We had this coming up, and if it's after the fact, be sure to send us photos, and because we like to see those, see everything in action and be able to share those. And so, yeah, you can communicate that. Probably email is the best way right now. So,
yeah. And photos are great. We had one of our champions do a robotics Path to the Plate where the robot picked up things and took them through the maze of the production system of food from the ranch to the processor. And we thought that was really cool in teaching that lesson. And that was extremely creative, and hopefully people will now, grab a hold of that idea. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. So definitely send pictures.
And a couple other questions that we have coming up, and I don't know if are you going to address the travel reimbursement, Dan?
Yes, I
Okay.
do. That's coming up. So the next one, South Texas, April 16th through the 18th. We want you to be at the Weslaco Center at 1 o'clock, not 1:15 or 1:30. Make sure your arrangements are to start at 1 because we may actually get in a van as soon as we're there and leave. So you need to be there at 1 o'clock on the 16th. We'll be there all day on the 17th, and then on the 18th, we will end at 1 o'clock to give you a chance to travel back to your home. If, from respect to April, the 16th, these are some of the topics that we have already talked to the specialists and researchers down there that we will be covering. So all the way from citrus production to, border issues. We will be incorporating talks specifically on pesticides and GMOs as we go through that part of the training. And then we'll be going to various farms. So we'll go to not only the Vegetable Research Center and the Weslaco Research Center, but also we'll be going to specific farms to look at onion production and citrus production, spinach production, watermelon production, several coffee and olives. So we'll get a wide variety of things to check out there. Maybe get some good coffee to drink while we're there. So this is the hotel. Okay, the hotel, I've already made arrangements with the hotel. Ask for the Path to the Plate room block. I will send these, this whole PowerPoint, this part of it to you via email as soon as this presentation is over. These also will be posted on the Champion website, so you can get access to them there. But the rate is $88. They don't have 30 king rooms or queen. You're welcome to stay with another agent if you can work that out. And you'll in a minute, you'll kind of understand why that might be important as to sharing expenses if you can. And again, we have some rooms opened up on April the 15th in case you come early. And then we also have you leaving on the 18th, 15th. We have that day, even though it doesn't start till the 16th. I guess that should be Tuesday the 15th. Sorry, that's a typo. But even though it doesn't start till the 16th, we'll end up going through and working with you on those dates. Okay, so Queens cutoff dates, you got that as April 1st. So just to talk about the finances, so I talked with Donna Alexander. I will be sending you a account number to charge your expenses to. You have $1,200 stipend to utilize for travel. That's the maximum, unfortunately, that we're able to provide based off of what we're allowed from administration. Basically, that's how many dollars they gave us to do, and we've taken the entire amount and divided it by the number of people that are going through the training. So you have $1,200. Anything over that would have to be local funds, as also talked about in the application process. You hopefully saw that. That was included in that. So you have $1,200. You'll write and use the account number that we'll provide for that, and then we will be keeping track of the amount that you have left, and we will give that to you before each of the trainings that we have as we go forward. So you'll know when we go to the Panhandle, you have X dollars still available in that account. She basically said there wasn't a way that you could have a constant access to know what that was. They're going to have to do this kind of record keeping by hand, and that they are willing to do that. And they will give us periodic updates as we go forward as to who has how much in each account still left over. Any questions from that, Julie?
Yes. So there are a couple of questions that came up. One, I'll just kind of go from the bottom up. A question is it okay that we fly? It is, but understand that if you fly and are going to charge that to the $1,200, your $1,200 allotment, that has to be done on a state credit card. That cannot be done on a personal credit card. So just understand that. So there's a few little certain rules and guidelines we have to follow. And if you have questions, I would say ask before you do it. That's always good. I know I'm one that sometimes asks forgiveness, but this time we have to ask permission. So just know that. And then as far as the $1,200, yes, that is per person. So you have a $1,200 allotment per person, not as the entire, all 30 of you. But yes, if you have county funds, yes, it's okay to use those as well. In fact, like I said, I would, again, you may want to use your $1,200 out of this first, and then you'll have to convert to your local funds. But that's totally up to you how you want to do that. But just know that there is $1,200 per person that we are allotting to help you with travel expenses, and beyond that, have to go to those local funds.
So if
I think let me look through here, make sure.
I might add to it.
Training locations. We're going, of course, we are in the Valley, and then we will go up to the Panhandle, Amarillo, Canyon, that area, and then the other one in Central Texas, and we're looking at either Waco or Stephenville area, or kind of in between. So that sort of gives you an idea of the training locations.
So let's now kind of go over specifically the April trips. So for example, if you're up in the Panhandle, you can fly from Lubbock or Amarillo, and you can go to McAllen or Brownsville. Prefer that you fly into McAllen if possible, but I will have a van and have a student that will pick you up at the airport if you provide me the times that you're going to arrive. So you wouldn't need a vehicle once you got to Weslaco. If you are going to use a rent car from any location, if you are going to drive from any location, you either need to use an extension vehicle or you need to use a rent car. At least go through the process showing that the rent car was more expensive than using a private vehicle. So private vehicles are as you know, within whether you're Healthy Texas or whatever, is basically not allowed. So they prefer that you either use an extension vehicle or that you drive a rent car. Once you're welcome to room with somebody at the hotel. That's your prerogative, or you can have a separate room. That's up to you. There's 30 rooms that have been booked, and there are some other available if we have to have those. And then once we get to the center, we will have vans that we will take people around to the different locations. So that will not be an issue as far as travel once you get to Weslaco.
Okay, then we have a couple of questions on county vehicles. Yeah, you're welcome to use your county vehicles. I mean, but that again, that'll be charged back, over how y'all do that at the county level. That's whatever that process is for you all at the county level is fine. But if your county allows you to use that vehicle to come to the training, that's okay.
Yes, and I'm sure there's a way to work in that account number to pay for mileage or whatever you do with a county vehicle.
Okay, then there's a question about the tax exempt form we should use for lunch, dinner, et cetera, with the pack to the plate. Those for the meals, most of the meals when you're in the training, those will be covered. We'll include those. So just know that.
Yeah, there'll be a breakfast at the hotel, and we'll provide lunch and dinner, but any other meals, again, it's not necessarily required to have receipts. I don't think, at least it hasn't been for me, but there is a maximum daily per diem.
Right. So we're asking, there's a question on clarifications. So it says, just to clarify, we cannot drive our personal vehicles. That, again, there's a formula that you'll have to use, and you'll have to prove that personal vehicle was cheaper to use the personal vehicle than a rental car. So we can send you, I think what we need to do is probably send you a little more kind of a FAQ sheet or a kind of a few more guidelines about that, so we can send those out. So again, on the personal vehicle, you just have to, on the cost, you have to use that formula to determine which is the cheapest.
Yeah, and you won't receive more than what you would receive for the rent car costs.
Right.
So you can drive a personal vehicle, but you will not get mileage. So hey, those are good. I definitely need to put together a frequently asked questions. So Julie, I'll look to you to help me put that together.
Sure. And I think there's some things already, Dan, through travel that we can get those out there.
Great. So you might see the slide that I have up. There is a specific location for a champion to access materials that wouldn't necessarily be accessed by all the agents. So if you'll notice at the very bottom of pathtotheplate.tamu, if you go to the very, very bottom, you'll see a champions with a little line and then agents. If you'll click on the champion site, The username and passwords are exactly the same as for the agent sites. Don't tell everybody else that. That got shifted to the being the same one when we ended up doing a renovation on the agent and champion websites. So in there, you'll see it says champion training materials and general overviews. So we will put all the training materials from this specific video conference in that location. We'll also add to that handouts and PowerPoints, as well as the recording that you see here. And also, we will be putting other information up there that would be specifically for your attention to read through. For example, the report that I sent out on nutrition research and kind of an opinion article about that would be put up in that session as well. Not necessarily provided to all the agents. If you have any questions about that, Julie, before, so make sure you go there, check it out. By the end, probably beginning of next week, we'll have all the material from this WebEx up on that site.
Just one comment, just be aware that when you're using, or you're going to that website, Google Chrome it seems to work best with this website. Sometimes we've had other search engine or other browsers not work as well. I know Jana sent me a text earlier. I think it was, what did she say? Oh, Microsoft Edge does not work with it. So just know if for some reason you try to log in, it doesn't work, you might need to just switch browsers. So.
And Microsoft Explorer and Edge do not work well with this.
So just another quick comment. I'm going through the chat box real quickly. Matt made the comment that yes, that cohort 1 they didn't get any stipend or any I'm not stipend, but any allowance for his travel. So this is a great thing. One of the things I will just clarify: if you do drive a county vehicle, you won't get reimbursed mileage for that county vehicle. So let me clarify that.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's 12:15. I apologize for being 15 minutes over. And Julie, any last words?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
All right. Hey, thank you all. And we'll look over any questions in the chat box and try to answer those as well as the ones on the questionnaire. Please respond to those questionnaires as we go forward, because we'll be doing another one for the face-to-face meeting in April as well. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.